There is no story in the Bible quite as terrifying or as final as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. We all know the narrative. It is the ultimate cautionary tale to cities on the plain, so consumed by wickedness and violence that God decides to wipe them off the map. Abraham tries to negotiate. He asks, "If I find 10 righteous men, will you spare the city?" God says yes, but there aren't 10. There is only one, Lot. So, the angels drag Lot and his family out of the city gates. And then, the sky opens up. Genesis 19:24. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. The Hebrew phrase is gophrith v'ish brimstone and fire. It wasn't a siege. It wasn't a plague. It was an instant, cataclysmic incineration. The text says the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace, and then silence. The cities were never rebuilt. They became a byword for desolation. For thousands of years, historians and theologians treated this as a myth, or, at best, a moral fable. Skeptics argued, cities don't just get vaporized by fire from the sky. That's theology, not history. They looked for volcanoes. They looked for earthquakes, so Sodom remained a ghost story. But in 2005, an archaeologist named Dr. Stephen Collins stuck a spade into a massive mound of dirt in Jordan, just north of the Dead Sea. He wasn't looking for pottery shards. He was looking for a crime scene. What he found over the next 15 years has shocked the scientific community. He found a city, a massive Bronze Age metropolis that didn't just collapse. It appears to have been obliterated by heat. He found pottery shards melted into glass. He found mud bricks boiled into liquid. He found human skeletons blown apart by a force stronger than a nuclear bomb. In 2021, a team of scientists published a paper in Nature Scientific Reports that proposed a terrifying theory. 3,600 years ago, a space rocket cosmic object similar to the one that exploded over Tunguska, Russia entered the Earth's atmosphere and detonated directly over this city. Today, we are going to investigate the most explosive claim in biblical archaeology. We are going to look at the site of Tall El-Hammam, examine the microscopic evidence of a cosmic airburst, and answer the question, did we finally find Sodom? And was God's judgment actually an asteroid? To find the city, we first have to read the map. For centuries, pilgrims and explorers assumed Sodom was located at the southern end of the Dead Sea. Why? Because there are weird salt formations there, including one called Lot's Wife. But Dr. Stephen Collins, a professor at Trinity Southwest University, argued that everyone was looking in the wrong place. He went back to the text. Genesis 13. Abraham and Lot are standing on the heights of Bethel. They are separating. Verse 10 says, Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord. The Hebrew word for plain here is kicker. It means disc or circle. In biblical geography, the kicker of the Jordan refers specifically to the circular alluvial plain just north of the Dead Sea, where the Jordan River empties into the salt water. If you stand at Bethel and look south, you can't see the southern end of the Dead Sea. It's blocked by mountains. You can only see the northern disk. So, Collins argued, Sodom must be in the north, in modern-day Jordan. He looked for a site that fit the biblical description. 1. It had to be massive, a city-state. 2. It had to have satellite towns Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim. 3. It had to be fortified. 4. Crucially, it had to be inhabited during the Middle Bronze Age, the time of Abraham, roughly 1700 BC, and then suddenly destroyed. He scanned the satellite maps and found Tall El-Hammam. It was a monster. Most people think of biblical cities as tiny villages, but Tall El-Hammam was huge. It had a footprint of 400 acres. To put that in perspective, Ancient Jerusalem, the city of David, was only about 10 or 12 acres. Tall El Hammam was a superpower. It had massive defensive walls, palaces, and a lower city. It dominated the entire region. It was the New York City of the Bronze Age Jordan Valley. If any city was powerful enough to be the biblical Sodom, the city that ruled the plain, this was it. So, they started digging. For the first few years, the excavation was standard. They found walls, they found gates, they found evidence of a thriving civilization that had existed for 2,500 years. But then, they hit the Middle Bronze Age to layer, and things got weird. Usually, when a city is destroyed by war, you find arrowheads, spear tips, and signs of fire. When a city is destroyed by an earthquake, you find walls tipped over in random directions. At Tall El Hammam, they found a 1.5-meter thick layer of ash and debris that defied explanation. Here is what the archaeologists saw. 1. The directionality. The debris wasn't random. Almost all the walls were sheared off and blown toward the northeast. It looked like a giant leaf blower had pushed the entire city in one direction. 2. The missing bodies. In a city of perhaps 50,000 people, they found very few bodies. The ones they did find were fragmented. It looked like the population had been vaporized or blown away. 3. The heat. This was the smoking gun. They found pottery shards that had turned into green glass. To melt pottery into glass vitrification, you need temperatures exceeding 1,400 degrees Celsius to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. An ancient house fire burns at about 600 degrees Celsius. A kiln gets to 10 degrees Celsius. Whatever hit Tall El Hammam was hotter than the surface of magma. It was hot enough to boil the water out of mud bricks instantly. Dr. Collins describes finding melted mud bricks. Imagine taking a brick, putting it in a microwave, and melting it like chocolate. That is physically impossible under normal conditions. They also found bubbled pottery where the water inside the clay flashed into steam so fast it created bubbles in the ceramic matrix. The team realized that no human technology in the Bronze Age, no siege engine, no torch, no army could generate that kind of heat. They needed a physicist. They brought in the Comet Research Group, a team of scientists who study cosmic impacts. They analyzed samples from the destruction layer. In September 2021, they published their findings in Nature Scientific Reports. The paper was titled, "A Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tall El Hammam, a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea." The paper argued that around 1650 BC, a cosmic object, an asteroid or comet, entered the atmosphere. It didn't hit the ground. If it had hit the ground, there would be a crater like the one in Arizona. Instead, it exploded in the air, an airburst, about 4 kilometers above the surface. This is exactly what happened in Tunguska, Siberia in 1908, where an airburst flattened 80 million trees. It is what happened in Chelyabinsk, Russia in 2013, when a meteor exploded and blew out windows across the city. But the Sodom object was much, much bigger than Chelyabinsk. According to the computer models, the explosion was 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The air temperature instantly spiked to 0 degrees Celsius, 600 degrees Fahrenheit. A shock wave moving at 740 miles per hour faster than the speed of sound slammed into the city. It sheared the top 12 meters off the 4-story palace. It pulverized the mud brick walls into dust. Anyone standing on the walls or looking at the sky was instantly blinded and incinerated. Their bodies would have been ripped apart into small fragments. The city wasn't just destroyed, it was erased. Skeptics will say, maybe it was just a really big fire or a lightning strike. This is where the forensic science comes in. The 2021 paper laid out evidence that is impossible to forge. 1. Shocked quartz. Quartz is a very hard mineral. To fracture the lattice structure of quartz, creating shocked quartz, you need immense pressure gigapascals of pressure. You only find this at nuclear test sites and asteroid impact zones. They found shocked quartz at Tall El Hammam. 2. Diamondoids. Inside the carbon ash, they found microscopic diamonds. These are formed when wooden plants are subjected to such sudden, extreme pressure that the carbon turns into diamond dust. 3. Spherules. When rock and metal are vaporized, they fly into the air as a mist. As they cool, they condense into tiny, microscopic spherules, and rain down. The soil at Tall El Hammam is packed with iron and silica spherules. This literally matches the biblical description of raining fire and sulfur. It was raining molten rock. 4. Platinum and iridium. The soil showed a massive spike in platinum and iridium. These are rare on Earth but common in space rocks. This is the fingerprint of the asteroid itself. 5. The salt event. This is the most biblical detail of all. When the object exploded, the shock wave hit the Dead Sea. It likely scooped up tons of salt water and vaporized it, spraying a superheated salty brine across the entire landscape. The soil samples show a hypersalinity event. The salt content in the soil jumped to 4%, enough to kill every plant and make agriculture impossible. The Bible says Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. While that might be poetic, the physical reality is that the entire area was encrusted in a layer of salt. This explains why the region remained uninhabited for 600 years after the destruction. The Garden of the Lord became a toxic wasteland. It took centuries for the rain to wash the salt out of the soil so people could farm there again. So, is the case closed? Is Tall El Hammam definitely Sodom? If you ask Dr. Collins, the answer is a resounding yes. But if you ask the wider community of biblical scholars and archaeologists, the answer is maybe. But let's be careful. Here are the main counter-arguments. 1. The timeline problem. The destruction of Tall El Hammam is dated to around 1650 BC, depending on how you calculate biblical chronology. Abraham lived either around 2100 BC, early date, or later. Some scholars argue 1650 BC is too late for Abraham. They argue that if Sodom existed, it should have been destroyed in the early Bronze Age around 2300 BC, not the Middle Bronze Age. Dr. Collins argues that the biblical timeline is misunderstood and that 1650 BC fits the Egyptian parallels perfectly. 2. The biblical minimalist view. Secular archaeologists are generally allergic to saying, "We found a Bible city." They prefer to describe it as a Middle Bronze Age city destroyed by a catastrophe. They argue that the story of Sodom might be a composite memory. Maybe it wasn't one city. Maybe the Israelites saw the ruins of many destroyed cities and combined them into one legend. 3. The scientific debate. After the 2021 paper was published, there was some drama in the scientific community. Some physicists questioned the data images, accusing the team of image manipulation. The authors issued corrections, but stood by their main conclusions. However, the presence of melted pottery and the directionality of the destruction is hard to explain with anything other than an airburst. Even critics admit something catastrophic happened there. 4. The name. We haven't found a sign that says "Welcome to Sodom." Until we find an inscription with the name of the city, we can't be 100% sure. But, as Dr. Collins points out, there are no other candidates. Tall El Hammam is the only massive city in the area that was destroyed at the right time. If this isn't Sodom, then Sodom didn't exist. This brings us to a fascinating concept called geomythology. This is the study of how geological events, volcanoes, floods, meteors get encoded into oral traditions and myths. Imagine you are a shepherd standing on the hills of Judea In 1650 BC, you see a flash of light brighter than the sun. You feel the ground shake. You see a mushroom cloud rising over the Jordan Valley. You go down to investigate, and you find the greatest city in the world, a city of invincible walls reduced to a pile of smoking ash. You find bodies twisted and blackened. You taste the salt on your lips. How do you explain that? You don't know what an asteroid is. You don't know what physics is. You only know one explanation: divine anger. You assume that a God did this. And if a God did this, the people must have done something terrible to deserve it. Over centuries, the story of the event gets passed down around campfires. The details get refined. The moral of the story gets sharpened. The event becomes the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This doesn't mean the Bible is fake. In fact, it means the Bible is preserving the memory of a real historical trauma. The story of Lot isn't just a fable about hospitality. It is an eyewitness account of a cosmic impact event, the angels striking the men blind, the flash of the explosion, the fire from heaven, the re-entry of the bolide, the smoke rising like a furnace, the aftermath of the airburst. Science doesn't disprove the Bible here. It illuminates it. It tells us that the authors of Genesis weren't making things up. They were reporting the most terrifying day in human history. So, did an asteroid destroy the city of sin? The forensic evidence at Tall El-Hammam is overwhelming. A city was vaporized, the pottery melted, the soil was salted, and it happened exactly where the Bible says Sodom was located. Whether you believe it was a random accident of orbital mechanics or the precise judgment of the Almighty, the result is the same. A civilization felt safe behind its walls. They felt invincible. And in the blink of an eye, they were gone. The story of Sodom resonates with us today, just because of the theology, but because of the fragility. We live in cities of glass and steel. We feel safe. But we are just one rock away from becoming a legend ourselves. The ruins of Tall El-Hammam stand as a silent monument to the power of the cosmos and a reminder that sometimes the fire really does fall from the sky. What do you think? Is Tall El-Hammam the biblical Sodom? Or was it just an unlucky city in the wrong place at the wrong time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the intersection of astronomy and archaeology fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that uncovers the real stories behind our beliefs. Thanks for watching.